child. Welcome to my house and to my kitchen and to another culinary adventure with one of America's master chefs. From New York City's Gotham Bar and Grill, Alfred Portali shows us the versatility of one of my favorite foods, duck.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
This is going to be a real culinary adventure because it's all about ducks. And just look at all of these ducks, and Chef Portali's going to tell us all about them.
Great. We're going to start with first this small duck. This is a mallard duck, a wild duck, and you can see that it has a darker flesh. Now this it's very lean and a little tougher, so we'd want to braise this duck. This is, most people are familiar with, is your Pekin or Long Island duckling.
Yeah, this is the, that's the one
most people
about
are,
all we can get, people.
This thing is a monster. This is the Moulard duck. Now, the Moulard duck, it's bred worldwide to produce foie gras. Now, this duck comes from Hudson Valley, New York, and produces foie gras.
Can you eat the breast of it?
Absolutely. The breast, the French call them magret. It's a very large breast.
Tastes kind of like a piece of beef, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I should say that the Moulard is a cross between the Pekin and the Muscovy. And I'm using a Muscovy duck because it's ducky. It has a very rich flavor. And
it looks less fatty.
I think it has a greater relationship of meat to fats. More interesting in flavor. It has larger breasts. As you'll see, we can saute this and braise it, and it's a versatile duck.
Oh, but I've never seen one of these in our supermarkets.
These ducks are certainly available mail order. I'm from Manhattan, and we have no trouble finding them. But any of these recipes could be done with the Long Island duckling.
Now, you're going to do a boned duck, and are you going to teach us all exactly how you do it?
Yes. Well, there are many ways to bone a duck. This is the simplest. We find where the leg joints are here, and we cut through the skin, and as you can see, it opens right up.
Yeah.
And we just sort of follow the dotted line, and we make a cut there. We'll repeat that on the other side. We open it up, and it just separates out. There's no...
just the natural muscle separation.
Yes. Now, I'll pick it up like this and pop the joints out very simply like that.
They're just attached to the small of the back.
And now just cut through. Be careful here. And we take off the first thigh.
Easy enough.
And the second here. Again, you can...
And once you have those joints free, it's very easy.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
So that's that. Now we're going to further bone this by separating the thigh from the leg. And most people don't know where to cut. They're searching for the spot, but as you can see, there's a little clue here on each thigh. There's a little seam that sort of tells you where you can put your knife, and then you just cut through. Simply.
Yes, and you can.
Yes.
No, you can see that.
All chefs know that, but they never tell anyone else because it's one of those chef's secrets. There we go. And we're going to save this for our soup. And the legs will go into our broth. Now we separate the skin. We feel here, this is I think called the keel bone, or the breastbone, and we're going to just run our knife down either side and make a cut. Okay. Now we open it up a little bit to see what we're doing. Now down here we cut, and here's the wishbone. So we're running our knife just along there.
And you're scraping right against the bone.
And that's it. So now just separate it off. Very simple.
That's easy. You can see
it. Very easy. I've cut over the wing here rather than through it because, again, I want to use the wing as part of our stock. I enjoy this at home, but I'm sure that your butcher, if you have a good relationship with him, would gladly bone this all up and put everything in.
I think one should learn how to do it oneself because how can you carve a duck, a roast duck, if you don't know how it's built?
If you don't know where the bones aren't exactly right. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this extra fat off, which I don't want in my stock, and we're going to save that along with the neck and the giblets and liver, all which can be used. The fat, of course, if you want to, you could certainly render that and use it to saute with. Duck fat has a tremendous amount of flavor. And the bones and the rest of the giblets here, will be used for our broth. Well, we begin by boning the breasts and the thighs and reserving them, and chopping up the carcass, the neck, and the bones for the broth.
Good.
So with a heavy chef's knife or cleaver, you finely chop the bones, which allows them to brown evenly and release all their flavors quickly. So we begin by heating a little bit of oil in a saute pan. We add our bones, and stirring often, we begin to brown them slowly. Once the bones are nicely brown, we pour off the excess fat, and we deglaze the pan with some dry red wine, being careful to scrape up all the brown bits that have clung to the bottom of the pan. Meanwhile, we have our vegetables, a small mirepoix, shallots, garlic, leek, and we lightly caramelize them and add that to your stock pot. You top off the pot with water. You bring it slowly to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, and carefully skim off any fat that comes to the surface. You simmer the stock for about 2.5 hours, or until it's richly flavored. At that point, we'll strain the stock through a fine mesh strainer, and we may want to return the stock to the fire and reduce it down, if necessary, to concentrate the flavors. Finally, we'll cool it down and refrigerate it until we're ready to use it. So now, let's make our raviolis. Here I have some made. These are foie gras raviolis.
Oh, boy.
And when I thought about this recipe, I thought, well, we can do a very simple duck broth with turnips and beans and a little bit of mushroom, all the flavors that I associate with duck. And then if you want to, you can dress it up a little bit. So we've added the foie gras raviolis and some black truffles, which we'll talk about later. I'm making these raviolis using wonton skin. They're very simple and very fast and very versatile. You can fill them with just about anything, and you can make them with just enough in a few minutes before eating.
You get these, you have to go to Chinatown?
Yes, in an Asian market. They're not difficult to find. We begin by laying out some wonton skins, and we'll need 3 for the tops. So the raviolis are quite simple. We begin by putting a little bit of mashed beans, the same beans that we're going to be using in the soup. We've mashed a little bit up.
Good.
Season them, a bit of garlic, some salt and pepper. These are rather large. They're called white runners. This is an heirloom variety.
No. You could use canned cannellonis, I guess.
You can use any bean you like. And in fact, mashed potatoes, leftover mashed potatoes work very well. So we just start by putting a little teaspoon of our bean puree on each skin. This is a terrine that we've made. It's a foie gras terrine. Very simple, salt, pepper, and we marinate it in a little Armagnac. And it's cooked quite simply and then pressed.
Great.
I also have a mousse de foie gras that is readily available. And I also say this soup is excellent with any type of ravioli. You can put a little mushroom ravioli in it. Again, we're dressing it up a bit. So I'll cut a slice of this, and we'll put a little chunk on each.
Every house should have a bit of foie gras in it, don't you think?
I think you're right.
It's so good.
Whoops. This is very simple.
Just a tiny bit, yes.
So now we've done this, and I have a little egg wash, or beaten egg, which I've added a little water to it. And this is going to act to stick the 2 skins together so they don't open during the cooking. You could use a little water here, but I find that I think the egg works
Well, you don't want them to open.
a little bit better, yes. So you simply just put this over it, pick it up, and press the edges together. Have you made little raviolis with wonton skins?
I never have. I've just eaten them, but they're so delicious.
A relatively new idea. And just press them like
It's
that
interesting
as
how
well.
ideas from all over the world are now incorporated in cooking.
The ingenuity of these young American chefs. You know, our cuisine is so young, and we really have no preconceived ideas of what to do. So,
which is great.
Very inventive, very creative. It's wonderful. Okay, well we've stuck those together nicely, and I'm using a little circle cutter to trim the edges to give them a nice finished look. We're going to also, just to be sure, we're going to go through and this was my job as a child when my mother made ravioli. I had to seal them by hand.
Was she Italian?
Yes.
That's always a good background for love of food, isn't it?
Yes, for raviolis. And I have a tray that I've sprinkled with a little cornmeal. Now that'll prevent them from sticking while they're in the refrigerator.
Well, that's a good idea.
And we'll put these away while we saute the duck.
Do you have to cover them with plastic or something?
Yes, cover them tightly with plastic and refrigerate them.
Yeah.
So we're using the four thighs for the recipe, and we'll put in a pan here. I'm going to add just a drop of, in this case, olive oil. I'm seasoning the duck with salt and fresh ground pepper. And we'll put them, skin side down. Now we want the
seasoning up right away.
To crisp. As you notice, I've left this bone, this thigh bone in here.
Yeah.
And the reason being is it helps prevent the duck from shrinking and shriveling and allow us to, we'll remove the bone later. And it'll allow us to carve
That's a good idea.
These cook slowly. I would cook them about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes in all. And we want to turn them when the skin is very crisp. So Julia, we've cooked these about 8 minutes on a medium fire. And we want to turn these when the skin is crisp and nicely golden brown.
That means just about all the fat is rendered out.
That's right, because you can see it's all in the pan. So these are going to now continue cooking slowly for about another 8 minutes. We want to cook this medium, as opposed to the breast, which is so nice, cooked medium rare or rare. This would be, I think, a little chewy if we undercooked it. Julia, these look about ready. They've cooked about 15 minutes, and we'll take them out of our pan. I'm going to put these aside to rest. Let's make our soup.
Good.
I have some very young baby turnips here. What we'll do is we're going to use the whole turnip. I simply cut tops off like this. These are wonderful to use because they're turnips can be sometimes bitter, but you'll never find these being bitter. And the bonus here is that if you get these lovely green tops, you can use them in your soup. Now we're just going to clean off the heavier stems. These were washed. We're going to just simply wilt these into the hot broth at the last moment. Now, we boil the turnips. They take about 8 minutes. I have some that are cooking here. And the other bonus about these is you'll notice I didn't peel them.
No.
And that is, and I was so pleased when I figured this out, that you can simply, using a cloth, simply rub the skin off. It comes off just like that.
That's a nice idea.
I think when vegetables are very fresh and simply prepared, I mean, there's just you don't have to do much. There's just a natural beauty to that.
They have their own lovely flavor.
So for the soup, I just want to cut these into rounds because, as you know, you eat soup with a spoon, and we want the garnish to fit nicely onto the spoon. Thickly slice them.
I love the flavor of turnips.
The flavor with the duck, it's a classic taste. We could do this soup with turnip raviolis. I think that would be wonderful. We'll put these aside for a moment, and let's talk about our mushrooms.
Yes.
We're fortunate enough today to have some chanterelles, which are one of my favorites. They're very colorful. They're delicious mushrooms.
And at least they're ones that are easy to recognize.
Yes. These are wild mushrooms, meaning they're not cultivated. And they'll be simply sauteed. Now, these are American mushrooms from the West Coast, and they're gathered
up around Oregon and Washington.
That's exactly right. If you don't have chanterelles, of course, use any of your favorite mushrooms. I think that just the little white button mushrooms will work just fine. And then there's a mushroom that's becoming very easy to find is is called a cremini, or a sort of a brown mushroom. And that's really one of my favorite mushrooms. It has a tremendous flavor, and they're inexpensive, and they're easy to find. Now, again, I want to thickly slice these because we're going to saute them briefly. They'll later be heated up in the soup.
Now, do you wash them or do you brush them?
What you can do is, if they're a little dirty, you want to trim just the very bit of the root there, and then simply scrape the stem down like that. Now, these are perfectly clean, but if you had a little bit of dirt, and the other thing is, if the cap had a bit of dirt on it, a little brush. Actually, they make little mushroom brushes, don't they? A little damp cloth will get off the dirt.
You just don't want to wash them if you don't have to.
Right. If you do, of course, they'll absorb water. If you have to wash them, the best way is to fill up a sink with water, throw them in, and vigorously toss them around, and then quickly lift them out, and you'll be all right. But you don't want to wash them. So I've heated a small amount of olive oil in the pan. And we're going to add I'm adding the mushrooms. Again, we want some high heat here. We just want to sear the mushrooms for this recipe. Produce a little color and sort of trap all the wonderful flavors in.
Give them more,
which
give them
will
more flavor in the soup, I guess.
That's right. When we heat them again in the broth, they'll release the flavor of the soup. Salt. And fresh ground white pepper. And these will cook just a couple of minutes. So these are beginning to brown a little bit. These are just the smell of sautéing chanterelles is just one of my favorite. Would you like to taste the mushroom?
I would.
Now it may be hot, so. I think they're well seasoned.
Well, they are. They're delicious mushrooms.
I'm putting these to the side, and in a moment we'll add them to the warm broth, which we have over here. Here's our duck broth, in which I'd like to taste. Absolutely fantastic. And
if you say so yourself.
We'll it's very good tasting. We'll re-season it once we add all of our garnish. You maybe
that is delicious. Very concentrated, isn't it?
Very good extract of flavors. Very concentrated. I'm going to get this down to a bare simmer. I don't want it reducing on us. Now, I mentioned before, this could be a very humble soup.
Yeah.
With white beans and turnips and turnip greens, or we can jazz it up a little bit.
Good.
The truffles. These are fresh black truffles.
Actually fresh. Wow. Where'd they come from?
France. As did this little machine. Now, this is a truffle slicer. And this allows you to slice the truffles.
Why, that's so heavy.
Very, very thinly.
Gosh.
And presumably what you pay for this, you make up in the thinness of your truffle slices.
Now, how much would one that cost?
Oh, boy.
Just say to me, not to a restaurateur.
We're looking at probably close to $100 here. So we take, again, a humble soup of turnips and duck broth.
Put a $100 truffle in it.
And we make it into
great.
a spectacular or New Year's Eve celebration. Oh. So this works by like a little mandolin. You simply...
Isn't it that price you want to do it very thin, don't you?
Well, that's right. And this slices them very, very, very thin. And of course we don't, all these little crumbs will all go into our soup. And we're going to add these now first so that
we'll get all that lovely taste.
We'll get that lovely taste, exactly.
A little bit underneath there.
Let me do another one. Let's be extravagant.
All right.
Say when. There we go. Again, these This is such
That's
a treat.
Wonderful instrument.
If you want to, you can dress up any dish.
Poached egg, for instance.
You can float a little caviar on here if we wanted to really get crazy. Okay, so we're going to carve the duck meat now. We've cooked it, leaving the bone in. That prevents it from shrinking and curling. We now need to lift that out, which is very simple. It just pulls out like that. And I want to cut this into thin slices.
You're leaving the skin right on.
Yes. At this point,
It looks lovely. It looks just right, doesn't it?
yes. At this point, if you wanted to take off the skin, I would remove it now,
Mm-hmm.
rather than because it's much simpler than removing it before you cook it.
Yeah.
So very thin slices here. I think we're ready to add our garnish.
Good.
Our chanterelles that are, and any of that juice that is accumulated in the pan. Turnips.
Lovely little turnips.
They're beautiful, sweet. The white runners. These are close to the Italian gigante beans. They're very creamy.
I know in France, I've seen that are very white.
They're
Just
wonderful.
delicious.
And last, we have our turnip tops that I'm just going to cut them like that. And we add these, and we're going to stir this. And I'm going to turn up our heat briefly. And while this is heating through, we'll put our duck meat in, and we have our foie gras raviolis. They take about 10 to 15 seconds to cook in boiling water. While we're waiting for our water to boil, let's quickly mince some chive. We want to slice these thinly. I have some here that I've sliced. Okay, I think we're ready. Oh, here we have all these beautiful.
Such a gigantic plate.
Is it an oversized soup plate, you mean?
Yeah.
This is just a beautiful, colorful.
Smells so good. No.
We don't want to
There are those little truffles.
forget the truffle.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of the broth. So we're going to cook our raviolis. 10 seconds, no longer. The skins cook very quickly, and we want to warm the center of the foie gras and the beans, but we don't want to melt it all.
Anything. Is that salted or just plain water?
Salted.
Salted water.
Yes. These are just about ready. We want to float them on our soup. They're very elegant. A bit of chive.
Lovely.
And our chervil. I love chervil.
I do too.
It's such a delicate, such
a
a
little faint
pretty
tarragon taste.
Well, this soup doesn't need much more than that.
I wouldn't think.
There we have it.
Just need a big spoon. Well, that's lovely.
Thank you.
Alfred, thanks so much for coming. That was very kind of you, and we really learned so much about duck.
Julia, it's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed cooking in your home. It's been an inspiration to me and to all of us.
Well, we think you're wonderful.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
very much.
Julia's got the tastiest site on the web,